I knew it. I knew I wasn't crazy. You know how I knew I wasn't crazy? Because the game felt different. You know when you're playing a video game and you're kind of doing something, you go, this doesn't feel right. And most of the time it's just because, like, I don't know, you're weird and like maybe you didn't get enough food that day or maybe you're dehydrated. No. I wasn't crazy. We are squishier than we should be. And it's because they didn't actually fix Shielding Storm at all. It still just does base life, and I have the proof for it. Man, I wish I didn't have to put out videos like this back to back. But if you noticed in my last two videos, I had been talking about the fact that I just generally felt squishier than I should be, and nothing really made sense. All my aspects are what they should be. Generating barrier off of max life and Shielding Storm should now be an incredible increase to survivability, but time and time again, I was dying to stuff that I just shouldn't be dying to. And it's because this thing just doesn't work. But it's even more insidious than that. It looks like it's working, and then it doesn't. Let's go ahead and take a look at it because it's wild, y'all. I just want the Necromancer to have this stuff that it's supposed to have. So for people who may not know what that rant was about, they recently changed the aspect of Shielding Storm. Shielding Storm used to say that it generated 6% barrier whenever it hit a target based off of your base life. And for people who don't know, at level 100, the Necromancer has a whopping total of 7,959 base life. Shielding Storm was changed so that it would generate barrier based off of your maximum life. And oddly enough, your maximum life can get significantly higher than your base life. So right here, I basically have like 2 times my base life in additional life here. If I were to add on even more maximum life and throw on this Doombringer, I would have significantly more maximum life. And what that should mean is that Shielding Storm should be generating a massive ton of barrier every single time that it hits a target. But how much maximum barrier should we be generating per hit? Well, if I have maximum life of 20,583 and I'm generating 6% barrier every single time I hit a target and Bone Storm hits targets twice per second, I should be expecting to get 20 total instances of 1,200 barrier generation. And what that means is that at the end of Bone Storm, I should get a total of 24,699 barrier. Well, let's go ahead and just test that in real time. Here's Bone Storm, here's the maximum life, here's Shielding Storm, and when I cast Bone Storm, let's look at how much barrier I generate in total. Just as like a quick fun fact, it's not gonna be that 20,000 number. No. At the end of the 10 seconds of Bone Storm, 20 damage instances, I generate a total of 10,787 barrier. So that's about 14,000 barrier short of what I should be generating, and that doesn't really make much sense. And remember when I said it gets even more insidious? Well, what I did was I went and just recorded that very quickly, and I looked at how many times we gained barrier over that total amount of instances, and this second data set is what we got. While the first damage instance gained me 1,236 barrier, which, if you take into account the issue with rounding errors, can't show floating decimals, etc., is exactly how much barrier we think we should be generating. And then every damage instance after that, I only generated 955 barrier. Let me go ahead and show you that in real time. So I'm gonna walk up, only let Shielding Storm hit once, and then I'm gonna duck back out. Rip, I actually hit it twice. But I generated 2,191 barrier. That's pretty short of the 2,400 that we think that we should generate, but it's only a little bit less. But what does that 2,191 actually represent? Well, it turns out, if you add together our first damage instance and our second damage instance, you get 2,191 barrier. And if you were to sit there and watch it time and time again, you'll notice that we actually only generate barrier over 10 instances, and every one after the first one is only 955. Now that's kind of a problem though. 955 is significantly less than what it should be, which is 1,234, 1,235 with rounding. In fact, if I were to do the math very quickly, so, just like 1 minus this divided by this, it is 22% less than what we should be getting. Now, what if it has something to do with like this weird coefficient between base life and maximum life, which is an issue that Temerity has. Temerity, as part of its calculation, takes the difference between your base life and your maximum life and just like reduces the incoming barrier by that amount. But sadly, that number actually doesn't follow along with this understanding. So if I were to do the exact same calculation right here, boodly boop, and actually show it to you in real time as opposed to hide it, these two numbers don't add up to 100%. So it's not some weird calculation with base life versus max life or some kind of weird variable that takes them both into account. So what's actually happening here? Well, a keen-eyed mathematician might notice two things. One, there are less instances of us generating barrier than you might think, because again, Bone Storm will hit a target twice, and the aspect itself says each time that Bone Storm damages an enemy, gain barrier. But if you stare at this number right here, really close, you can actually figure out the equation. Let's go ahead and take 2 times, so 2 damage instances per second, our expected barrier generation percentage, and multiply that number by our base life. The number that we get is 955. So interestingly enough, you are generating barrier on 2 hits per second, but it only gains that barrier at the end of the second. So it's not like per damage instance, it's per second, which is just interesting. It ultimately comes out to be the same amount of barrier, but it's just weird that you don't gain it until the end of the second, as opposed to each time that it deals damage. But it's the fact that how much barrier you're generating is actually based off of your base life still and not your maximum life. And that's why our number is so much lower than what we would expect it to be. Now, what if it's just something to do with my gear? Maybe I don't have enough maximum life. Maybe I don't really understand the equation altogether that well. Well, let's just go ahead and just like toss on a stupid amount of additional maximum life. We're currently at 20,000. And now we're at a whopping 36,000. And what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go hit this target real quick, and we're gonna see how much total barrier we generate over the length of Bone Storm. Again, notice that the barrier goes up every second as opposed to every damage instance, which is just an interesting observation. But at the end of this, we're gonna end up with a whopping 11,745 barrier. So nearly doubling my total maximum life, I went from doing 10,000 barrier to 11,000 barrier. That shouldn't be right. In fact, with my new maximum life of 36,000, I actually expect to generate 2,193 barrier every single time that I do a damage instance. But here's the fun fact. If I were to take the barrier that I generated, 11,745, and I were to do a quick little equation, which says, what is the initial barrier generation tick of 2,193, which I can actually show you in game. Walk up, do a single damage instance. Here we go. And I generated 2,194, again, rounding errors here. And I were to just subtract what the barrier I generated on my lower amount of life is, and you get the exact same amount of barrier that I generated previously. It's just based off of base life and not maximum life. I knew something was up. I knew I just wasn't generating the barrier that I was expecting to generate, considering it was supposed to be anywhere between like 2 to 5 times as effective, depending on how much maximum life you had on your build. And I wasn't getting that. I was dying in content that I was surviving in previously, and I couldn't figure out why. It's because they literally just didn't do the aspect right. So not only does like Soulbrand not work with its barrier to generate damage reduction, but Shielding Storm isn't generating the barrier that it should be. This actually led to a death on Chronix's character because again, they expected to be generating basically like 4 or 5 times as much barrier as they were previously, and it just didn't work. So yeah, I've already reported this to the developers because obviously this is like a pretty massive issue as far as I'm concerned. Shielding Storm was already not good enough to use in high tier pit pushing because it just can't generate enough barrier based off of base life to actually add on a significant amount of effective HP to be worth the aspect slot. You basically just kind of had to get good in dodge more often and not rely on this. But the changes that should have happened should have made it an incredible survivability tool, returning it to its bygone glory days back in the day when it was like good enough because we had so much damage reduction, and this buff to it was supposed to kind of bring it back up to snuff with that ability to output enough survivability to be worth the aspect slot. But at least for right now, if you're currently playing on the Necromancer, and most notably if you're currently playing on hardcore, this is the reason why you're not surviving in scenarios where you expect to be able to. You're just not generating the barrier that is owed to you. But we are getting hilariously scammed on how much survivability this aspect is supposed to be offering. So I just want to put out this video. Again, I've already reported this to developers. Hopefully this is something that is fixed very quickly because it's just going to lead to the deaths of a lot of hardcore characters who just don't know to not be expecting it. But also, most notably, I want the ding dang things I was promised in my patch notes. But let me know down in the comments if you come across any weird interactions like this. There is a ton of stuff popping up that we're kind of finding from this patch, just a bunch of like not fixed, not implemented, and weird undocumented changes, and I'd like to get this information out as soon as possible so that people are equipped. But I'd love to hear from you down in the comments below. If you're brand new to the channel, consider subscribing. It would mean the world to me. Also, if you've been watching my stuff and you never click that button, I might just be showing up in your algorithm. It happens all the time. I think only like 50% of the people who watch my stuff are subscribed, and I think that number goes down every single day. So please check that button. It would mean the world to me. Toss a like onto the video if you wouldn't mind as well. But as always, thank you so much for watching this video. I truly hope that it helps you, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.